Once again, the Nissan Micra is a very class-competitive, characterful supermini. This time it's stylish and very good to drive, while setting a high standard with its sense of safety. You know that car in this class you were thinking of? Stack it up against this one.
Here's a supermini with a lot to prove, made by a brand with a lot of ground to make up in this segment. Welcome to the 5th generation Nissan Micra. Now, if you're shopping in this sector, you'll probably recognise the name. Indeed, a decade or so back, there was apparently more public awareness of the Micra badge than there was of the Nissan brand itself. When was the last time you saw one, though? Yeah, that's the point. Over 7 million Micras may have been sold worldwide since this model line's original introduction back in 1983, but pretty few of those customers were folk who opted for this particular car's direct predecessor. That Mark IV model almost single-handedly reduced Nissan Supermini sales to around a third of previous levels. The company knows it has only itself to blame for this. In 2010, it transferred Micra production from Sunderland in the UK to plants in India, Thailand, Mexico and Indonesia using low-cost labour. Those factories were given a 4th generation model to assemble with a global remit that was theoretically designed to satisfy everyone, but its cheap, characterless demeanour achieved precisely the opposite result, and sales sank to the bottom of the supermini segment. Belatedly, since then, the Japanese maker has realised what most of us previously already knew, namely that the Micra was at its best when it was built and individualistically designed in Europe. The Mark II and Mark III models proved that. This Mark V version, launched in the spring of 2017, aims to do so again. There have been no half measures taken this time around, with a full-on European design, mostly engineered in the UK and built in the same French Renault plant near Paris that makes that brand's rival Clio model. The Micra shares an evolved version of that car's platform too, but just about everything else here is new, and that's something that you'll have already picked up on from a glance at these avant-garde looks. They usher in a completely fresh driving experience with drive dynamics that are borrowed from larger models in the Nissan lineup. High-tech safety and media technology has been democratised for use here too. Plus, there's a far more pleasingly designed cabin that offers more space, and it can be embellished with some tempting customer options. Sounds promising, doesn't it? Let's put this car to the test. No half measures have been taken with this 5th generation Micra, and when it comes to driving dynamics, the approach that's been taken is just as uncompromising as is the case with the styling, the interior design and the passenger safety. Now, the platform may be basically that borrowed from the Mark IV model Renault Clio, but it's been completely reconfigured to suit the way that this Nissan now sits 55mm lower and 78mm wider than the car replaced. That means a lower centre of gravity and wider axle tracks that give the car a much broader and more planted feel on the road. Now, given that this might encourage you to drive a touch faster than before, it's just as well that all Micras come with Nissan's chassis control package, and that's been borrowed from the larger Qashqai model, and it incorporates active trace control and active ride control. And now the trace control system uses the principle of torque vectoring that applies subtle brake pressure to the front wheels at speed through the turns. Now, this loads up the front of the car, pushing the tyres more firmly into the tarmac and increasing their bite on the road. Active ride control also uses the automatic subtle brake application, the system gently applying pad to disc, usually at the rear, after you've hit a bump in the road to ease back body pitch and keep the car more stable. This is the kind of technology you simply don't expect to see in a supermini, and it all works without you ever being aware of it, giving a more fluid, flowing feel to the way this Micra progresses down the road. It would be nice if the suspension setup also reflected this. You'd think it might. After all, Nissan's stated aim with the drive dynamics of this car was to provide the handling of a Fiesta with the ride quality of a Polo. In reality, that was an impossible brief for the British engineers at Cranfield, and inevitably it's been delivered with a few compromises along the way. Bottom line, well, it's more Fiesta than Polo. The rather firm quality of ride sees to that, something that's particularly noticeable around town, where the Micra fidgets a little over surfaces that the Volkswagen would just cruise across. Comparisons to the Ford are better made. Body lean through the bends is very well controlled, and there's plenty of mechanical grip to supplement the electronic kind that's delivered through the active trace control system. Not quite so good is the power steering system, and that's another thing that's been borrowed from the Qashqai, which, although it's better than the Supermini norm, lacks the feel we'd ideally like at speed, which is a key reason why overall this car isn't quite as much fun to push along quickly as a Fiesta is. The steering is beautifully light and usable around town though, and awkward parking manoeuvres and tight lock-to-lock turns in the city are easily accomplished. What else? Well, the driving position is well judged. You instantly feel comfortable at this wheel, and the brakes, which are discs up front and drums at the rear, haul off the speed effectively. Refinement at speed is excellent, aided by a standard fit acoustic windscreen. Oh, and there's a nice light clutch, and that brings us onto the gearbox. That's a slick 5-speeder that's really satisfying to use. You would think though that at least one of the engines on offer could have been mated with a transmission offering up a 6th ratio, and that Nissan might have launched this car with an automatic option, given that all the mechanicals are pretty much carried over from a Clio range that has long offered a dual clutch auto alternative to its customers. The brand thinks that a DCT auto setup will be too pricey for Micra buyers though, and it's developing a cheaper belt-driven CVT box as an alternative. I mentioned engines, let's talk about those. One of the reasons that Nissan has been so freed up to develop other aspects of this car is that it hasn't had to worry very much about the oily bits. Earlier I mentioned the platform relation this car shares with the Mark IV Clio. Well, all the basic mechanicals are lifted from that car too. 3 power plants to be specific, with the 2 petrol units, both of the currently fashionable 3-cylinder configuration. Now, we would urge you to try and avoid the entry-level 71 PS 1 litre normally aspirated unit. That struggles up to 62 in a lengthy 16.4 seconds and would eventually top out at 98 miles an hour in the unlikely event that you were on a very long, completely level and unrestricted highway. As most buyers will quickly conclude, the engine to have is the one we're trying here, a 0.9 litre IGT90 turbo unit that's not only used in the Clio but additionally in Renault's Twingo city car, as well as in another rival to this Micra, the Dacia Sandero. Like most small turbo engines, this one doesn't offer up much from low down in the rev range, but once you get going, it's a peppy little thing. And given that there's 50% more pulling power than the base unit can provide, it's not surprising that the performance figures are far more acceptable. 62 miles an hour from rest occupies 12.1 seconds en route to 109 mph. The final alternative is the kind of power plant that's fallen a little from favour in Supermini circles in recent times, a diesel. Now, if you can push up to the premium required for this though, that DCI unit is worth looking at. The 90 PS output may be the same as that of this IGT petrol alternative, but with another 50% hike in pulling power, this black pump engine gives the Micra an added dash of mid-range punch that isn't really reflected by the stated performance figures. Rest to 62 in 11.9 seconds on the way to 111 miles an hour. Plus the fact that this 1.5 litre 4-cylinder DCI unit gives this variant quite a bit more weight in the nose doesn't do it any harm when it comes to corner turning at speed. If you're used to the conservative design of the old 4th generation Micra, well, you might need to sit down and have a cup of hot sweet tea after looking at this one. Expressive and emotive, this is the kind of shape you'd more readily associate with a motor show concept car than a production model, with an athletic silhouette that's much longer, lower and wider than was offered before. There are no real carryover styling cues from the Mark II and Mark III body shapes that created waves and which particularly distinguished older parts of the Micra model line, but this car will get the neighbours talking in exactly the same way. Now, from the front, the shortened bonnet design features these arrow-sharp creases that flow diagonally into this so-called Delta Wing chrome strip that frames the redesigned Nissan badge in the centre of that V-Motion grille. Radiating out from that, these angular headlamps include signature LED daytime running lights, and they can be ordered with full LED beams on request, and that's a rarely seen option on a Super Mini. The meaner, more purposeful look continues further down, so there's no conventional bumper, just sharply sculpted, colour-coded mouldings that include front fog lamps at each corner. There's just as much going on here at the side, certainly enough to distract you from the fact that this MK5 Micra is a substantial 174mm longer than its predecessor. And that was a car that claimed to be a Super Mini but was sized more like a smaller city car. Whether or not you happen to be familiar with that boxier model, what you're more likely to notice on this one is its 55mm lower roofline, which dips dramatically as it passes over the front door before levelling out again as it goes towards the rear. These black B and C pillars create the currently fashionable floating roof effect, while the C pillar also incorporates discrete rear door handles. Equally unusual is this shoulder swage line, which falls sharply below the wing mirror before rising through the front door handle and flowing upwards into the tail lamp cluster. Stylized wheels complete the effect. They vary from 15 inches in size up to the 17-inch rims that we have here. There's more crisp, contemporary detailing here at the back, where a high rear roof spoiler sits above a raked screen and a smart boomerang-shaped taillight clusters. Further down, this sculpted bumper hides the exhaust pipe, and it features this carbon-look centre panel above that middle-mounted lower rear fog light. As usual, of course, what is more important is the stuff you can't see, primarily in this case, a developed version of the Renault-Nissan Alliance's V platform that's also used by the 4th generation Renault Clio. So, time to take a seat in the front and look around this cabin. And this is an area in which previous Micra customers will be seeking the most improvement. Now, sure enough, things have been much enhanced over what went before. The fascia is based around what Nissan calls a gliding wing dashboard layout, which feels of much higher quality and which can be personalised with colour-coded versions of this centre panel. In addition, a lot of effort has gone into the ergonomics and also into the driver comfort, with this lowered seating position being of particular benefit. The development team behind this car included one member who was 6 foot 8 inches high and another just 4 foot 11 inches in height, and both claim that they can get very comfortable behind the wheel of this car. The first time you get behind the wheel of this Nissan, you notice the effort that's gone into all this. Everything falls nicely to hand, and the seat offers more support than you usually get in a Super Mini of this sort. Plus, the pedals are perfectly spaced. There's plenty of adjustment for both the wheel and the seat height, and the seat rake can be precisely adjusted by a rotary dial rather than with a cheaper and less accurate pull-up ratchet. Through this D-shaped multifunction steering wheel, the instrument cluster is very much as you'd find on a more expensive Qashqai crossover model, or at least it is, providing you avoid entry-level spec and you get yourself a variant fitted with the colour advanced drive assist display that sits between the two main dials. And then this 5-inch TFT screen can either be set to show everything from navigation to performance data, or it can be used to customise many of the car's electronic systems. Anything this monitor can't tell you will probably be covered off by the 7-inch centre dash infotainment touchscreen that you get, providing you avoid that entry trim level. Buyers of mid-range Accenta models get a straightforward so-called display audio system, which includes access to Apple CarPlay, but rather disappointingly, it doesn't incorporate something rather more basic, a DAB tuner. Now for that, you have to upgrade to the more sophisticated Nissan Connect setup that's fitted to plusher variants like this one. Now that also includes satellite navigation and also access to smartphone-style apps. Functionality, well, that's aided by these handy shortcut keys on either side. Plus, this setup can be fitted out with a reversing camera and also incorporate the optional intelligent around view monitor that we've been trying here. Now, this around view monitor is actually a very useful thing to have because the thick rear pillars and the shallow rear screen can sometimes throw up a few problems when you're reversing. Now, in view of this, Nissan's decision to limit the standard fitment of rear parking sensors to this top Techno trim level is disappointing. At this level in the range, you also get stitched synthetic leather inserts around the front of the cabin to enhance the ambiance, and that's already much improved by the way that build quality from the French factory in Flins seems much better than it was with the old Mark IV Indian assembled car. Probably the extra technology helps to influence the greater perception of quality this time around. And our favourite touch here is the optional Bose personal premium audio system, which comes with 2 speakers actually built into the driver's headrest. The resulting standard of sound is better than anything we previously heard in a Supermini. As for cabin practicalities, well, there aren't many issues in that regard. The 10-litre glove box has been specifically designed to take a 2-litre drinks bottle, while bottles of up to 1.5 litres in size will sit in the front door bins. In addition, there are 2 cup holders between the front seats, and there's storage in the centre console ahead of the gear stick for phones and similarly sized objects, with USB and 12-volt socket charging points close by. Use these and then activate your handset with standard Bluetooth connectivity, and you'll also benefit from a better microphone that's provided for the phone hookup. So let's take a seat in the rear. Now, there are no 3-door variants in the Micra model line, so you'll always find a pair of rear doors accessed by this hidden catch high up here in the C-pillar. Now, they swing open wide enough to make access easy, but they also remain short enough so as not to cause problems when you're in tight parking spaces. And inside, well, that depends on your expectations. Now, because of this swept-back styling, we didn't expect the kind of space back here that might be offered by a boxier-looking rival like, say, a Skoda Fabia or a Honda Jazz. Even so, we had hoped that the lower seating position would compensate to some extent and give rear occupants more headroom than this. If you regularly carry adults in the back, this isn't the car to choose in this class. Fortunately, as Nissan knows perfectly well, most Supermini buyers use these pews primarily for children, and they'll be more than satisfied with what's on offer here. A pair of ISOFIX child seat mountings come as standard, although even on this top model, rear electric windows don't. If you have to transport older folk, they'll be fine on shorter trips, and that's aided by the significantly longer wheelbase of this 5th generation model, which has freed up a bit more space for legs and knees. Shoulder width, well, that's also fine for 2, thanks to the extra 78mm of width that this car enjoys over its predecessor. So finally, let's take a look in the boot. That's accessed by this light tailgate, and once you've raised that, there is a bit of a drop from the load sill to the load floor, but that's par for the course in this sector. With the rear seats in place, this Nissan offers 300 litres of cargo accommodation. That's good, but it's nowhere near class leading. A few signs of cost cutting are in evidence here. So where, say, a Volkswagen Polo would have flat boot sides for perceived quality, here you merely get rough panels that follow the contours of the wheel arches. Plus, the luggage cover sits on string hooks rather than decent plastic clips, and it rests on a perch rather than probably clipping in and out, although Nissan says that that makes it quicker to remove. I suppose that's true. You also have to do without luggage tie-down points or any sort of bag hook, which seems unnecessarily mean. Still, the luggage area provided here is properly shaped to accommodate something like a fold-up buggy or the weekly shop. There is some room beneath the boot floor too to take some smaller items, but that's only because Nissan, like most of its contemporaries in the Supermini segment, declines to offer any sort of space-saver spare as part of standard equipment. Of course, as usual, you can extend the cabin available by using this 60/40 split-folding rear backrest. Pushing that forward leaves a big step up in the boot floor, but it does free up a useful 1,004 litres of capacity. Price is not the only determining factor in supermini segment success. If it was, then the previous generation version of this car would still have sold in reasonable numbers. Still, Nissan knows that if it's going to achieve its target of making this a top 10 segment contender, then it has to be costed very competitively. Now, the technology included here prevents the Japanese maker from pitching this car at budget brand levels, but a sharp pricing span that will see most models sell in the £12,000 to £16,000 bracket gives dealers plenty to work with. The very plushest variants will take you £2,000 to £3,000 higher than that. And as before, there is only a single 5-door body style on offer, and buyers choose between 3 engines, and they're all paired to 5-speed manual transmission. Now, things kick off with an entry-level 71 PS petrol power plant, but you're not really going to get much of the benefit of Nissan's various dynamic upgrades with that old tech and rather breathless unit. It's well worth then finding the extra £1,000 that's necessary to upgrade to the brand's far more modern 0.9-litre IGT90 turbo petrol engine, which is what we've been trying here. It's more efficient as well as being considerably faster. For a premium of around £1,300 more, the alternative is another 90 PS engine. This one, the familiar Renault 1.5-litre DCI diesel unit. The extra cost for that will only make sense if you cover a higher annual mileage than will be typical in a car of this kind. So much for the pricing. What about the value proposition those figures represent? Well, in considering that, you'll want to know how this Micra has been costed against the models that dominate the supermini segment in this country. And pretty effectively, as it turns out. You'll pay much the same and maybe even a little less for one of these than you'd have to find for a directly comparable Vauxhall Corsa, while an equivalent Ford Fiesta would cost around £1,500 more in petrol form and around £500 more in diesel, guys. To get a comparably priced Volkswagen Polo, you'd have to accept less power, less equipment and older engine technology, so higher running costs. As for the Renault Clio model that shares much of this Nissan's engineering, well, that struggles in value comparisons too. In base petrol and diesel forms, it lists about £1,500 above a comparable Micra. You'll also need to think in terms of that kind of premium if you reject this Nissan in favour of equivalent versions of popular superminis like Peugeot's 208, Toyota's Yaris and Seat's Ibiza. That is not to say that Nissan has the value proposition here squared away. You don't have to resort to really cheap-feeling budget brand supermini models, a Dacia Sandero or an MG3 for instance, to pay less than Nissan's charging here. Predictably, Skoda and the South Korean brands put up a strong fight in this segment, and for sure, certain versions of the Skoda Fabia, the Kia Rio and the Hyundai i20 will cost you slightly less. Plus, cuddly-looking Citroën C3 could save you around £1,000, although that car does have a somewhat love it or hate it style of appeal. Suzuki's supermini alternatives in this segment would save you even more, but the Japanese brands Baleno and Swift models don't have this Nissan's character or its sophisticated drive technology. As for other class options, well, you'd probably have to find extra for a comparably equipped Honda Jazz, and you'd certainly pay more for an equivalent Mazda 2. All of which represents a rather long-winded way of explaining to you that, yes, Nissan has effectively done its homework when it was price pitching this car into its intended market. So, if you're happy with that, let's turn our attention towards deciding whether you'll be satisfied by the equipment levels that'll be on offer across the range. Now, that is quite possible. Entry-level base Vizia variants come with more kit than you'd expect from the bottom rung of the spec ladder. That modest asking figure getting you niceties like front fog lamps, rain-sensing wipers and intelligent auto headlights that dip themselves at night in the face of oncoming traffic. You also get a rear roof spoiler, LED daytime running lights, a trip computer, a height-adjustable driver's seat, remote central locking, a stereo with Bluetooth connections and the 60/40 split-folding rear seat back that some rivals make you do without at this level. We would question the lack of a DAB radio and the rather feeble 2-speaker audio setup, but apart from that, the key items are pretty much all there. Plus, there's a much higher than average level of safety equipment, and that's something that we're going to come on to presently. For only a little extra, Vizia Plus trim gives you air conditioning too. Nissan expects, though, that most Micra customers will at least make it as far as mid-range Accenta level, if only to get access to one of the optional exterior packs that will allow you to personalise the look of this car. Now, if you can stretch to that, you'll get yourself a body-coloured finish for the front door handles and the mirrors, which makes a surprising amount of visual difference. You also get cruise control and an extra 5-inch instrument binnacle advanced drive assist display between the two main dials. Plus, there's a proper level of infotainment provision with a 7-inch centre dash colour touchscreen, which offers access to a better 4-speaker display audio system, plus smartphone app integration and the Apple CarPlay system, which will enable you to access your phone's functions from the monitor. Want to go further? Well, if so, there's an N connector level of trim that gives you 16-inch alloy wheels, power folding mirrors, rear privacy glass, automatic air conditioning, LED ambient interior lighting and a leather steering wheel, as well as adding in that missing DAB tuner as part of an upgraded Nissan Connect infotainment setup, and that includes full navigation. Here, though, we've got the top Techno trim that additionally gives you larger 17-inch alloy wheels, a keyless entry and start system, rear parking sensors with a rear view camera, extra leather style trim around the cabin and a Bose audio system featuring speakers built into the driver's headrest. On to options, with nearly all the features on offer requiring you to have first avoided entry-level trim. Now, the primary focus here seems very much to be on buyer personalisation, with 3 possible packs available to decorate the exterior and another 3 on offer to upgrade the cabin. The basic exterior pack gives you side mouldings, coloured door mirror housings and front and rear bumper finishes, while with the exterior pack plus, 17-inch alloy wheels with coloured inserts also get added to that tally. Finally, the exterior pack ultimate option gives you all that and what some might see as a rather tacky set of decals. As for the cabin packs, you can colour code the middle part of the fascia, the central door cards and the outer seat edges in either powder blue, energy orange or invigorating red. It's all quite bright if you like that sort of thing. More conventional aesthetic options include various extra cost metallic and pearlescent paint finishes. Full LED headlamps are optional on most models, and buyers of volume Accenta trim variants can add in 16-inch alloy wheels, a comfort pack with keyless entry and auto air conditioning, and a vision pack including rear parking sensors and the Nissan Connect infotainment system incorporating a rear view camera. What else? Well, if we couldn't stretch this top model, we'd want the desirable Bose personal audio pack with its unique front headrest speakers. Meanwhile, if we had stretched this top Techno level of trim, we might be tempted to go further and add in heated front seats, and those come included if you go for the full leather upholstery option. On to safety, and we have to say we're impressed here. We've seen electronic camera-driven features like autonomous braking, lane departure warning and auto-dipping headlamps on Superminis before, but they're never features fitted right across the range. Well, that changes here, and rivals are going to have to take note. Now, we've already touched on the clever headlamps, plus it's worth mentioning that the standard lane departure warning system, which gently vibrates through the steering wheel rather than beeping annoyingly, also includes an intelligent lane intervention feature that'll gently steer you back into your lane if you've unintentionally deviated from it. So let's also recap on the principle of autonomous braking in case you're not familiar with that. This Micra's standard so-called intelligent emergency braking setup working via a camera that scans the road ahead as you drive in search of potential accident hazards, with sensitivity that's especially good at picking out people thanks to an incorporated pedestrian recognition feature. So if a potential problem is detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond, or well, perhaps you aren't able to, the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. And there's more clever standard safety stuff too. Active ride control can gently apply a brake, usually at the rear, after you've hit a severe bump to ease back body pitch. And active trace control adds light braking to the front wheels during tight cornering, loading up the front of the car and planting the tyres more firmly on the tarmac for extra traction. Avoid entry-level trim and you also get traffic sign recognition, and that pictures road signs as you pass and then displays them on the advanced drive assist display screen screen in the instrument binnacle. More conventional standard safety stuff includes twin front, side and curtain airbags, ABS anti-lock brakes and an ESP stability program. Plus, Micra buyers get ISOFIX rear child seat mounts, a tyre pressure monitoring system that keeps an eye out for deflating rubber, and a hill start assist feature that prevents the car from rolling backwards as you pull away on inclines. All of that doesn't leave much scope for options, but with the top 2 trim levels you can pay extra for a Vision Plus pack that includes 2 main elements. Blind spot warning works on the move to alert you if you're about to pull out when another vehicle is hidden in your blind spot, and an intelligent around view monitor uses the Nissan Connect screen on the dash to show HD images from a surround camera system that incorporates moving object detection, and that will alert you if someone steps into your path. It's got to the point where no self-respecting new generation Supermini can show up these days without a downsized 3-cylinder engine. Normally though, a power plant like that is a premium price choice with more affordable variants in the range driven by the older tech 4-cylinder units that the manufacturers aren't quite so keen to feature in their advertising. There's none of those sort of shenanigans here though. Both the Micra petrol motors using the triple cylinder formula and benefiting from the lighter bulk that goes with that approach. As a result, this Nissan tips the scales at only just over a tonne, which, to give you some perspective, makes it about 140 kilos lighter than a directly comparable rival Vauxhall Corsa. Now that is a saving in weight that could be roughly equivalent to asking your entire family to get out and walk. All of this is important because this Mark V model can't boast the kind of completely new lightweight platform that enables some rivals to make great strides in efficiency. Some compensation for this comes in the form of a very slippery shape. There's a best-in-class drag coefficient of just 0.29 CD, and that's helped by a specially moulded aero floor. As for the figures, well, it may seem a touch counterintuitive that the more powerful 90 PS turbo unit is cleaner and more frugal than the base 71 PS normally aspirated engine, but that's mainly because, for reasons best known to Nissan, the entry-level unit can't be specified with an engine start-stop system. That budget power plant manages 61.4 mpg on the combined cycle and 103 grams per kilometre of CO2. Those are figures the IGT90 turbo model improves to 64.2 mpg and 99 grams per kilometre. On the top Techno model that we're trying here, the use of larger 17-inch wheels will hit those returns by around about 5%. Diesel engines aren't especially popular amongst Supermini buyers these days, but this Micra's runner-derived 1.5 litre DCI 90 unit is a good one, managing up to 88.3 mpg on the combined cycle and up to 85 grams per kilometre of CO2. Again, larger wheels will affect that showing, and you can impact it even more by ordering your Micra DCI 90 in base Vizia trim, in which form Nissan rather meanly deletes the engine start-stop system. Obviously, how close you get to those figures in normal day-to-day motoring will be affected considerably by your driving style. Now, if you go for a variant that's fitted with the Nissan Connect infotainment screen, you'll be able to make your approach more eco-friendly by keeping an eye on that setup's incorporated Eco Score system. It grades the efficiency of your driving at the end of each trip, and it does it in terms of 3 factors: pull away, deceleration and cruise. And it also provides a graphical history of your green friendliness to date. Now, if you've got that Connect setup, then you'll also have a sat-nav system with so-called eco-routing, and that's a feature that sees it able to calculate the route that is likely to use the least fuel. What about other running cost issues? Well, service intervals for the petrol engines come around every 12 months or 12,500 miles, whichever comes around soonest. For the turbo diesel motor, the 1-year period remains the same, but you can travel up to 18,500 miles between scheduled stops before any maintenance is going to be required. As part of any Nissan dealer visit with your car, you'll be provided with a free courtesy vehicle and a video health check for your Micra that you can watch on your phone or on your computer. Nissan also provides a 3-year, 60,000 mile warranty as standard, and that can be lengthened to 4 years, but with the same mileage cap. Now, this recognises that most Supermini drivers tend to cover lower distances, but it aims to give added peace of mind for those looking to keep their vehicle for a bit longer. And in case of any problems, there's breakdown assistance with roadside help included with the car's protection package. Looking further down the line, residual values will obviously be key. So after 3 years and 30,000 miles, independent experts reckon that your Micra will still be worth between 35 and 37.5% of what you originally paid for it. So to give you some perspective, that's a better return than you get from a Ford Fiesta or a Vauxhall Corsa, and it's only slightly behind what you expect from a Volkswagen Polo. As for insurance, well, the base 1 litre 71 PS model is rated at a super affordable Group 1E. That'll be very appealing to younger drivers. Comparable base VW Polo is rated at Group 6E, so quite a difference. The popular 0.9 litre IGT90 variant that we're trying here starts in Group 3 and rises to Group 4 if you choose one of the 2 highest trim variants. The diesel engine sits in Group 7 or 8, depending on which specification you prefer. We knew this 5th generation Micra would be a huge improvement. It had to be. The previous model was, if anything, a backward step from its predecessor. Perhaps though we weren't prepared for just how serious Nissan was going to get in its pursuit of supermini segment success. The sleek styling, well, that might date, but it's certainly enough to make a Fiesta or a Corsa look very dull indeed. The downside to that lies in the necessary compromises entailed in terms of rear seat headroom, but that'll only ever be an issue if you regularly carry adults in the back, and that's something that most supermini buyers hardly ever do. Are there other issues? Remarkably few. The ride is a little firmer than some might like, but clever chassis tech provides ample compensation for that, making this car almost as fun to hustle through a series of bends as a Fiesta is. Now for you that might be irrelevant, but it has to be significant that this Micra feels more sure-footed through the turns than most of its rivals. And it is very significant that in terms of across-the-range standard electronic safety kit, it's better equipped than any of them. What that all leaves us with is a car that ought to appeal way beyond the core market that Micra has always previously targeted: cash-strapped parents, driving instructors and motorists of a certain age. In our view, it's everything a thoroughly modern supermini should be: stylish, sophisticated and cheap to run. In short, we urge you to approach this Micra with a fresh perspective. After all, Nissan certainly did.